Peeps, Kenny Molotov here in the studio, and I'm about to answer a question by LT Chapters and a new subscriber, Sandeep Kumar. Guys, thank you for sending me this question. Now, I've been asked this question a few times, and the truth is, I think it really depends on the company you're working with, the place you are in the world, so it's something that you're gonna have to take with a grain of salt. I don't know how much exactly your plumbers in your area will earn, but what I can tell you is my experiences, what I'm earning, what my friends are earning from plumbing school and whatnot. But we're also going to jump into the web just to look at what people are saying and whether or not I'm seeing the same thing or if there a discrepancy. So let's jump right in. So when I do a general search of how much money plumbers make, I get this little snippet from the mobile.nytimes.com, and it says plumbers and the related trades of pipe fitters and steam fitters who often work in commercial and industrial settings earned median pay of about $49,000 a year nationally, well above the $35,000 average for all occupations according to the 2012 data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and that was published March 24th, 2014. By the way, I'm going to try to link everything down in the description below, so if you want to read anything in further detail, just check down there. So I have one from the Globe and Mail. The national average for someone starting out is around $18 to $25 an hour, or about $37,000 to $52,000 a year, according to Daryl Shaker, Executive Director of the Mechanical Contractors Association of Canada. He says more experienced plumbers earn about $26 to $59 an hour, or $54,000 to $74,000 a year. And that's from Canada itself. If I go to payscale.com, I'm going to look specifically at plumbers in Canada. Payscale.com says a plumber earns an average wage of $27.67 per hour. A skill in gas fitters is associated with high pay for this job. Pay for this job rises steadily for more experienced workers, but goes down noticeably for employees with more than 20 years experience. So the average hourly rate is between $16.12 to $38.70. Checking out Indeed.com, Indeed says the average journeyman plumber salary in Canada is approximately $32.55 per hour. And that was a 2006 data point collected. From ePlumbingCourses.com, plumber salaries are discussed above, but note that the median pay in 2010 for plumbers, pipe fitters, and steam fitters was around $47,000, which is $22.43 per hour. In comparison to electricians earn almost the same at $48,000, and carpenters earn $40,000. So what I find interesting about this topic is that I've noticed that sometimes the numbers are completely off or completely out there, which make it seem like plumbers are making way more money than they actually are. But the numbers I was reading out to you right now, the averages seem to be really similar to one another. And these are things I've definitely read, but also know firsthand that I know plumbers that are making that much money per hour, essentially. So I wanted to demystify a few things. First and foremost, the way apprenticeships work is that when you get into an apprenticeship and you finally sign your papers and you're off to school to do your basic plumbing, according to the college, supposed to be paid something like, I think it was 50% of what an actual journeyman is making. So when I first got into plumbing, I was making $15 an hour with my father. Now they say, according to the apprenticeship, that every single year you go through your apprenticeship, you're supposed to be making a little bit more every year because you're that much closer to becoming a licensed journeyman. So that's something to keep in mind. I started off at around $15 an hour, and I didn't bump up till a couple of years later where I started making $20 an hour, $25, and just to put it on the table right now, I'm currently making $30 an hour with the company I'm with, which is my father's company, and I have friends that are making around the same, but for the most part I think a lot of them are making more than me actually at this time. So a couple of things to keep in mind. When you work for a small plumbing company that's based in service, like my father and I, what I've experienced is that service workers don't make as much as the union worker. Now here's the thing you got to know about union workers. Unions have very regulated rules, and from what I understand, all union workers make the exact same amount of money if they're in the exact same place in the hierarchy. And what I mean by hierarchy is if you're a first year apprentice, you're making that much. All first year apprentices are making that. If you're second year, third year, fourth year, if you're licensed, all licensed journeymen will be making that. And if you want to start getting more money after that, you have to look into becoming a foreman on a job site, etc. etc., etc., etc. So I had a conversation with a friend of mine who's in the union, and what I know is at the exact same position he is right now where I am, which is we're around 4th to 5th year apprentices, he's making around $38 an hour. What my friend from the union was saying was that licensed journeymen make $45 to $48 an hour right now, which is a super healthy wage. And just to put it in perspective, so if you're making $45 an hour, you are racking gross $86,400 a year. That is before taxes are taken off, obviously. And 84 grand a year is a very healthy place to be in, but that is something to keep in mind. I know that plumbers typically make similar wages, but I definitely know unions, because they're so regulated, that they definitely fight more and more for making sure that wage goes up every year incrementally. So that's something to keep in mind. So at $30 an hour that I'm currently making, if I get 40 hours a week for 52 weeks, I'm making around $57,600 a year. And it's something that definitely is keeping me happy and keeping me healthy, and we've been able to do a lot, and I've been able to purchase things for YouTube and whatnot, so it's a very healthy place to be in. For my friend who's getting $38 a year, let's do some math, he's racking in $72,960 a year. Now another thing you got to keep in mind, like I said in other Q&As, plumbing goes up and down. There are sort of seasons for plumbing, and there are certain years that are great and certain years that kind of slow down, and especially with service, I find that there are certain times of the year where you're really busy, then you're not busy, really busy, not busy. And with unions, that happens as well, where you'll be working non-stop for, let's say, 30 weeks, and then all of a sudden the job closes down, the job finishes, and then you're out of the job for a few months because the union has a list of people it has to go through, and it rotates through that entire list. So if you lose your spot on the job site, you are put to the bottom of that list, and then they got to rotate through that many plumbers to finally get to you. So it is something to keep in mind, that that's sort of something that stops you from getting 40 hours a week for 52 weeks for both sides of the industry. But I think it's quite typical for a first year apprentice to start off between $15 to $18 an hour, depending on where you are, and then work your way up incrementally from there. Now I've seen some reports that say plumbers make over $100,000 a year, some make even over $200,000 a year, and that's something I want to demystify quickly, because I don't want you to get your hopes too high. I want you to at least know what you have to do, where you have to take this in order to get there. What you have to realize is that there are different categories of plumbers. Some are apprentices, some are licensed journeymen, some are foremen, and then some are business owners. And that's what I want to sort of remind you of, that yes, there are plumbers out there at this very moment making over $100,000 a year. In order for me to get up to that $100,000 or $200,000, you start getting into the sphere of owning a plumbing company where you have multiple plumbers working for you at the same time. So that's just one thing to keep in mind, that as one person, you can probably get to the $100,000 mark depending on how much your company is paying you. But if you're aiming to get way higher than that, then you really have to start looking into pricing jobs where the labor is really intensive, where you have to hire 15, 16 people to be able to get the work done, doing an entire high-rise building, etc. These are the sorts of jobs that are going to start racking in way more money for you as a plumber. So if you wanted to get really way up there and start making loads of money in the future, then that's probably where you're going to have to take your work. There's only so many hours in the day that one person can work. So when you hear of plumbers that are making way more than $100,000 to $200,000 a year, that person most likely is an owner of a company and is working on multiple projects at the same time with multiple plumbers in their company, where bigger money starts rolling into the company. Another thing you got to keep in mind though, as you progress as a company, the more work you get, the more risk you're taking. So that's something to keep in mind, that the more work you have, the more money that's being passed around, the more workers that you're putting into the working field, the more mistakes that can possibly happen, etc. So it's not an easy thing to build a company. It's actually quite difficult, and it's also quite scary at the same time because of liabilities and whatnot. So that's another thing you got to keep in mind. That's why some companies stay at a certain threshold, because they're only comfortable with so much risk. When you start doing high-rise buildings, for example, the plumbing costs are in the millions. That's when you also got to realize you got to hire union workers. You got to make sure that you have 45 people constantly working. You got to make sure that the material can be bought, that the labor can be paid for. You constantly have work, that there's no delays with other things, because once you start laying people off and time is being wasted, all that time is actually money and you're just constantly bleeding from the pockets. It's something that is way more difficult than I think people take into consideration immediately. There's a lot of risk involved in getting bigger companies and growing a company. So that's why there are plumbers that just decide, you know what, I don't mind doing the labor, just being a laborer, just being a journeyman on the job site, rather than being the owner of a company, because there's just way more paperwork involved and way more costs. It's a constant assessment of where you can go to get the best bang for your buck, and also get the best laborer for your work, and also get the best material, etc. So there's a lot to keep in mind. Nonetheless, peeps, I hope this information helped out, because I think it's something crucial to you guys, and I know that you're wondering whether it's going to be worth it for you to join the trade if you're not in the trade already. Plumbing is fantastic work, and my final words are this. Here's something you gotta realize. The hardest time for anybody financially is usually during a recession, and one thing I gotta remind you is that you're gonna need lights, you're gonna need toilets, you're gonna need bathtub, whether you're doing well economically or whether your country is in a recession. That's something you gotta keep in mind. There's always gonna be work in these things, because here where we live, indoor plumbing is a privilege we all have and a privilege we've all come to need.